You're not exactly gala material anymore, Simone. Don't take it personal.
The morning of the biggest night of her career, Simone Ashworth stood in front of her closet and heard her husband call her ugly for the first time in 11 years of marriage. He didn't shout it. That was the part that stayed with her. He said it the way you'd mention the weather, flat, almost bored, while nodding his tie in the mirror behind her. You're not exactly gala material anymore, Simone. Don't take it personal. She didn't move. She just watched his reflection instead of her own. Stories like this don't start with the slap or the scream, or the door slamming so hard the pictures shake on the wall. They start quietly, months before, in 100 small moments nobody else was in the room to see. By the time the truth arrives, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels like something that was always going to happen. You just weren't allowed to know it yet. This is one of those stories, and by the end you'll understand why some women don't get mad. They get ready. Simone had built Ashworth Interiors, from a folding table in a rented studio in Baltimore into a firm whose work had been photographed in 4 design magazines, and one very memorable spread for a senator's Georgetown townhouse. She was 41, sharp-eyed, and the kind of tired that doesn't show up on your face until you're alone. For the last 2 years, almost everything she'd earned had gone quietly into propping up her husband. Damon's failing sports agency, the one he still introduced at parties as thriving, the one that hadn't signed a client worth mentioning since a running back tore his ACL and vanished from the league. Damon Ashworth had a way of talking about money like it embarrassed him to need it, and a way of spending it like it embarrassed him to be careful with it. He'd grown up the golden boy of his neighborhood quarterback, homecoming king, the guy everyone assumed would end up somewhere important. 20 years later, somewhere important had shrunk down to a leased BMW in a corner, office he was 3 months behind on rent for. Simone knew this. She'd seen the bank statements. What she didn't know not yet was that Damon had spent the last 4 months rebuilding his ego somewhere else entirely, in the company of a woman named Renee Price, his college girlfriend, recently divorced, recently rich off her own settlement, and recently very interested in reminding Damon what it felt like to be someone's whole world again. The Longview Foundation Gala was the kind of event Simone had been trying to get invited to for 6 years. It wasn't just a room full of money, it was the room. Developers, senators' wives, 2 former ambassadors, and the kind of old money families who decided which up-and-coming designer got handed a museum wing to renovate next. Simone's invitation hadn't come from Damon's shrinking network. It had come from a client, a woman named Catherine Voss, who'd seen what Simone did with a 100-year-old brownstone and decided the world needed to see it too. So that morning, when Simone laid her navy dress across the bed, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that let the work speak instead of the woman, Damon walked past the doorway, glanced at it and laughed. Not cruelly, almost fondly, like you'd laugh at a child's drawing. You're wearing that? To the Longview thing? It's a beautiful dress, Damon. It's a beautiful dress for a PTA meeting. He straightened his cufflink. Look, I'm not trying to be an ass. I just think, at our age in that room, you want to bring your A-game. And lately you haven't exactly been... He gestured vaguely at her. The way you gesture at a general problem you didn't want to name directly. Haven't exactly been what? Taking care of yourself. It happens, I get it. You've been buried in work. He checked his watch. Renee's coming tonight, by the way, as my +1, since you'll probably want to leave early anyway. Networking's never really been your thing at these things. The room went very quiet in Simone's ears, though nothing in it had actually changed. Renee, she repeated. You're Renee, from Morehouse. Don't make it weird. She's a donor. The foundation wanted her there anyway. I'm just walking her in. He finally looked at her directly, and there was something in his face. Not guilt. Guilt would have been almost comforting, but a kind of tired condescension, like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. It's not that deep, Simone. She should have screamed. Some version of her, 10 years younger, would have. Instead, something in her went very still and very clear, the way water goes still right before it freezes. Okay, she said. Damon blinked, thrown by how easy that was. He'd expected a fight. He almost seemed disappointed not to get one. Okay? Okay. She picked up the navy dress, folded it neatly, and laid it back in the closet. Have a good night, Damon. He left 20 minutes later, smelling faintly of a cologne she didn't recognize, whistling. What Damon didn't know what he had never once bothered to ask in 11 years, because he'd stopped being curious about his wife somewhere. Around year 6? Was that Simone? Ashworth had spent the last 3 weeks in near total secrecy, designing something for herself. It started as a joke, almost. Catherine Voss, over lunch, had teased her. You dress every room in this city like it's about to be photographed. And you show up to your own events looking like the hired help. When's the last time somebody dressed you, Simone? Simone hadn't had an answer. So Catherine had made a call to a designer she knew from her Paris days, a woman named Ada Isabello, who did custom pieces for exactly 4 clients a year and turned away everyone else. Adais had taken one look at photos of Simone's work, the confident lines, the fearless color, the way she wasn't afraid of drama when a room called for it, and said, I know exactly what this woman should be wearing. She's just never let herself wear it. The dress had arrived 4 days ago in a garment bag. Simone hid in the back of her studio closet, behind fabric swatches, where Damon never looked. Ice blue, off the shoulder, trimmed in soft feather detailing that moved like something alive. A skirt that fell in layers of tulle and beading, slit just enough to suggest confidence rather than desperation. It wasn't a dress that asked to be noticed. It was a dress that made not noticing impossible. Simone hadn't planned to wear it tonight. She'd been saving it, for what, she wasn't sure. Maybe for the day her business finally got the recognition it deserved. Maybe for a day she felt like the woman in the mirror matched the woman running a company. Standing in her bedroom at 6:40 p.m. alone, holding a phone that hadn't buzzed once since Damon left, Simone realized that day had arrived. It just hadn't come the way she expected. She called her sister first. Not crying, that surprised even her. He said what? Angela's voice cracked through the speaker, somewhere between fury and disbelief. He said I wasn't Gala material anymore. Simone said it slowly, testing how much it still hurt now that a few hours had passed. Less than she expected. And that Renee's going with him instead, as his +1. Simone, Renee Price? That Renee? That Renee! There was a long pause. Then Angela said very quietly, Wear the blue dress. Angela! Simone, wear the blue dress. The car Catherine had sent, a courtesy, for my favorite designer, she'd said, without knowing yet how much Simone would need it, pulled up outside the Longview. Estate at 8:52 p.m. Simone sat in the back seat for exactly 90 seconds before. Stepping out, watching her own reflection in the tinted window, hair styled in soft waves by a stylist. Catherine had also insisted on sending diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's, and the ice blue dress catching the estate's golden light before she'd even fully stood up. She didn't know as her heel touched the red carpet that 40 feet ahead of her, Damon was standing frozen mid-sentence, Renee's manicured hand tucked into his elbow, his mouth still open from whatever he'd been saying, because he had just turned, out of habit, to see who the photographers had suddenly swarmed toward, and found himself staring at his wife. Not the woman he'd dismissed that morning. Someone else. Someone the entire red carpet had gone quiet for. Renee's grip on his arm tightened without her seeming to notice. Damon's expression cracked open, shock, then something closer to panic, and Simone walked past both of them without so much as a glance. Her chin level, her pace unhurried, like a woman who had absolutely nowhere else more important to be than exactly where she was standing. Behind her, she heard someone whisper to a photographer, "Who is that?" She smiled, not for them, for herself. She had no idea yet that the night was about to hand her far more than a moment of vindication. Inside that ballroom under the chandeliers was a piece of information about Damon that would make everything he'd said to her that morning look like the smallest betrayal of the evening. Simone didn't look back at Damon again. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift in the air behind her, the particular silence of a man realizing, in real time, that he has badly misjudged something he thought he understood completely. Catherine found her within minutes, champagne in hand, eyes bright with something between delight and vindication. "I told Adise you'd wear it eventually," she said, kissing Simone's cheek. "I didn't expect tonight, but I'll take it. Half this room is asking who dressed you." "The other half?" "The other half is asking who your husband thought he was bringing instead." Simone allowed herself a small laugh, the first real one in hours. It felt like exhaling after holding her breath for a very long time. She didn't seek Damon out. She didn't need to perform anything for him. That was the strange clarifying gift of the last 12 hours, somewhere between his comment about the dress and her hand on the car door. She had stopped needing him to see her. She simply was seen by a room that had no idea what he'd said to her that morning, and didn't need to. But the night wasn't finished revealing itself to her yet. An hour in, deep into the reception, Catherine pulled Simone gently aside near the terrace doors. Her voice dropped low. "There's someone here who's been asking about you. Not about the dress." She hesitated. "About Damon." Simone frowned. "Who?" "Walter Higgins. He runs due diligence for Longview's lending arm." Catherine's expression had shifted, the playful sparkle gone, replaced by something more careful. "Simone, I wasn't going to say anything tonight. I didn't think it was my business. But since you're standing here looking like that, instead of hiding in a corner somewhere, I think you should hear it from someone instead of finding out from a letter." "Hear what?" Catherine glanced toward the bar, where Damon stood a little too stiffly beside Renee, laughing a little too loudly at something a foundation board member had said. Walter mentioned in passing that Damon's agency took out a bridge loan 5 months ago. 6 figures. Longview financed part of it through a private lending group Walter consults for. She paused. The loan was secured against a property. Walter assumed you knew, because your name was on the paperwork. The room seemed to tilt very slightly under Simone's feet. "My name," she repeated. "On the deed. The Baltimore house." Catherine's voice was gentle now, the voice you use for someone standing at the edge of something. "Walter said it went through with both signatures." Simone had signed exactly nothing in 5 months that she could remember relating to their home. She and Damon had bought that house 8 years ago with money she'd earned. In the years before Ashworth Interiors had taken off, back when Damon's agency was still just an idea he talked about over dinner, it was the one asset in their marriage that was entirely, unambiguously safe. Or so she had believed until 90 seconds ago. She found Walter Higgins by the terrace, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, who looked immediately uncomfortable the moment. Catherine introduced them, as though he understood exactly what he'd accidentally set in motion. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said carefully. "I hope I haven't overstepped." "You haven't," Simone said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'd like to understand what you saw." Walter explained it plainly, the way a man does when he'd rather not be having the conversation at all. 5 months ago, Damon Ashworth had approached the lending group for a bridge loan to keep his agency's lease and payroll afloat after losing his last major client. The loan required collateral. The collateral offered was the Baltimore property, jointly owned, requiring both owners' signatures to secure against. The paperwork, Walter said, had come through complete. Both names. Both signatures. Simone had never seen those documents in her life. She thought back, carefully, deliberately, the way you retrace steps, looking for where you dropped something valuable to 5 months ago. A weekend in early spring when Damon had asked her, almost offhandedly, to sign what he called some renewal paperwork for the home insurance, while she was elbow-deep in fabric samples, for a client presentation due the next morning. She remembered barely glancing at the pages. She remembered him sliding them across the kitchen island, already turned to the signature line, a pen already in hand. She remembered thinking, even at the time, in some small unexamined corner of her mind, that it felt strange for him to be handling something like that, and then forgetting about it completely, because she trusted him, because 11 years of marriage is supposed to mean you don't have to read every document your husband hands you. "I need copies of that paperwork," Simone said quietly. "Tonight, if that's possible. Tomorrow, if it isn't." Walter nodded slowly. "I can have them sent to you directly, given the circumstances." He hesitated, glancing once toward the bar. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Ashworth, I've reviewed a great many loan files in my career. That signature didn't look rushed. It looked practiced." He didn't say the word forged. He didn't have to. Simone did not make a scene. This is the part she would tell people about later. The part that surprised even her sister when she heard the whole story. She did not walk across that ballroom and throw a drink in anyone's face. She did not confront Damon in front of the senator's wife or the 2 ambassadors or the photographers still lingering by the entrance, hoping for a second look at the woman in blue. "Simone." He recovered fast, flashing the smile that had once made her fall for him at 26. Wow. You look incredible. I didn't know you had... We need to talk." "Not here." Her voice was even, almost pleasant. which unsettled him more than shouting would have. Renee beside him had gone very quiet, watching Simone with an expression that was trying hard to look bored and failing. "Can it wait? We're kind of in the middle of... It's about the house, Damon." Simone kept her eyes on his. "And the loan. And the signature that isn't mine on the documents. Walter Higgins has been reviewing all evening, 3 feet from where you're standing." She had never, in 11 years, seen the color leave Damon's face that fast. They spoke on the terrace. Away from the noise, Renee left standing alone. At the bar with a drink she suddenly didn't seem to want any more. Damon's excuses came fast and tangled. He'd been going to tell her. He was going to pay it back before she ever needed to know. It was temporary. It was supposed to protect them both. The agency just needed 6 more months, he never thought. "You never thought I'd find out," Simone said quietly. "That's the sentence you're looking for." He didn't argue. She thought, standing there in a dress worth more than the humility he'd shown her all day, about how small he suddenly looked. Not because of what he'd done. Betrayal, forgery, the quiet unraveling of trust, but because of how casually he'd done it. The same casualness with which he'd told her she wasn't Gala material. The same offhand cruelty, just wearing a different shirt. "I'm not going to yell at you here," Simone said. "You don't get that from me tonight. What you get is this. I'm calling my attorney in the morning. Not about the marriage, about the forgery. Walter already has copies. You forged my signature on a legal document. Damon, that's not a marriage problem. That's a felony. Simone, please. If you just let me explain to Renee's lawyer." He stopped himself, but not fast enough. "I'm not going to yell at you here," Simone said. "You don't get that from me tonight. What you get is this. I'm calling my attorney in the morning. Not about the marriage, about the forgery. Walter already has copies. You forged my signature on a legal document. Damon, that's not a marriage problem. That's a felony. Simone, please. If you just let me explain to Renee's lawyer." He stopped himself, but not fast enough. Simone tilted her head. Renee's lawyer. Damon closed his eyes. It came out slowly after that, the way these things always do once the first thread is pulled, that Renee hadn't simply been an old flame rekindled out of nostalgia. Renee's recent divorce settlement had come with a very particular clause. Access to capital for exactly one new venture, approved by her ex-husband's family trust, provided it was managed by someone with an established sports agency license. Damon's failing agency, worthless on paper, suddenly became valuable to Renee for one reason only. It was a vehicle. A legal shell she could pour money into and control from behind the scenes, using Damon's name and license as the front. In exchange, she'd offered him exactly what his ego needed: admiration, validation, someone who looked at him like he was still the golden boy from Morehouse, not a man 3 months behind on his office lease. He hadn't taken Renee to the gala because he still loved her. He'd taken her because she was, quite literally, buying him. Simone left the terrace alone. She didn't cry, not there, not yet. She found Catherine near the ballroom doors and simply said, "Thank you for tonight." "All of it." Catherine, reading everything in her face that words hadn't said, squeezed her hand once, hard, and didn't ask questions she already understood the answers to. The car ride home was quiet. Somewhere around the 3rd mile, Simone finally let herself cry. Not for the marriage. She realized, surprised at herself. She'd stopped mourning that somewhere on the red carpet. The moment she felt the room's eyes land on her instead of her husband's absence. She cried for the 11 years she'd spent making herself smaller so a fragile man could feel bigger. For every unread document she'd trusted without question. For the version of herself who used to think love required constant, quiet self-erasure. By the time the car pulled into her driveway, the crying had stopped. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was something steadier, the particular calm of a woman who finally understands exactly what she's dealing with, and exactly what she's going to do about it. 6 weeks later, Damon Ashworth's agency license was suspended pending investigation. The forgery charge, once filed, moved faster than either of them expected. Walter Higgins's documentation had been thorough, and a handwriting analyst confirmed what Walter had already suspected on site. Renee's involvement unraveled publicly not long after, her family trust quietly pulling every dollar the moment the fraud allegations surfaced, leaving Damon not just exposed but alone. The golden boy finally out of rooms willing to applaud him. Simone kept the house. The court didn't take much convincing once the paperwork's origins came to light. Ashworth Interiors, meanwhile, didn't just survive the scandal. It found itself with more inquiries than Simone could handle alone, half of them from women who'd seen the photos from that red carpet before they ever knew the story behind them and simply wanted to work with whoever had walked like that. Catherine introduced her to 2 new clients within the month. One of them was Walter Higgins's daughter, renovating a brownstone in Georgetown. Simone wore the blue dress exactly once more, a year later, to the opening of her firm's first gallery show, a retrospective of a decade's worth of rooms she'd built for other people, finally standing in one built entirely around her. Someone asked her that night, half joking, what the secret was to walking into a room like she owned it. Simone thought about it for a moment, then smiled, not the practiced, polite smile she used to wear at Damon's side, but a real one. You stop asking someone else's opinion of you to decide your worth, she said. And then you just walk. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it just clears the room of everyone who was never really looking at you in the first place, so you can finally see yourself. If this story made you think differently about the things you've quietly forgiven, or the paperwork you've trusted without reading, or the people who make themselves feel bigger by making you feel small, let me know in the comments. I read everyone.